So here's part two of our look at how we provide pastoral care within the church practically. And like I said, these videos, this sort of series is aimed particularly at those that are just wanting to get the foundations, just wanting to be able to care for each other a bit more, walk alongside other Christians through the challenges of life, and to pray with them. And so what I thought I'd do at this stage was put all of that into context. So I'm going to use our own church as a kind of working example. Like I said last time, being aware that this probably isn't that dissimilar to how a lot of churches would function, especially churches, I guess churches that are at least at a sort of a medium size. So churches, once you get over about 60 people within the church, so small to medium, up to around 200. That's the kind of size of church I'm thinking of. Our own church in the last couple of years has grown to about 100 altogether, with about 60, 70 regular attendees. That would be a mixture of adults and children. We're blessed with lots of children. And our church context it's primarily families with young children and teenagers. So we've got a couple of older people. Not many. I've personally been a pastor of a church that had quite a few, probably about 10-20% of the church would have been over 70. That gives a different sort of environment, a different factor again. And the other thing to say is that our church context, we don't have lots and lots of student type age people. And I've been part of, I've not been part of the leadership, but I've been in the church as a student, or as a young person, when that would have been more the case. That is something that could sort of change at any kind of time. But the first thing to observe here is that actually it helps all of us to know our church context, to be aware of the type of people that are part of the church, but also the type of people that we want to be part of a church. It's not just about looking and saying this is what our church is like, but we also want to be thinking about what we want our church to be like in the future, who we want to be welcome. And generational mix will be a factor. Other factors might be whether people are from more middle class or working class type contexts generally, and also whether or not a church is multi-ethnic. Our church is blessed with a wide variety of ethnic backgrounds. And that's great to see, but it will have implications for where the needs arise and where the opportunities arise as well. And that's the sort of thing that not only pastors and leaders in the church should be aware to, but all of us should be aware of what is our church like, and also what would we like it to be like, given the context, the communities that we serve in. But in our context, what that means is that, first of all, yes, we encourage everybody to be looking out for one another. This one another in our body ministry, or bearing one another's burdens that I talked about in the previous video, It's very much the culture that we want to grow as a church, and I think that would be the case in lots of churches. Now, some churches, particularly as they grow, with longer history, would have specific ministry teams set aside for prayer and a level of pastoral care, to be doing things like visiting people and that kind of thing. We don't in our context, but that might be something that we do as a church in the future, and that might be things that other churches have. But in our church, it's very informal. It's look out for each other, and that reflects age and stage of the church. But what we then say is that in terms of one another, that's something that we should all feel able to do in terms of looking out for each other, praying with one another, supporting one another, encouraging each other to look at what God's word is saying, but also recognising that we don't have all the knowledge, skills and gifts in ourselves individually, but there may be those with particular gifts, particular skills, and we want to be not trying to do things on our own. The worst thing that you can do is actually intervene and offer advice that is unhelpful or even harmful. So we want to guard and protect from that happening. So in our church, the way it works is that we recognise that pastoral care happens best within communities, and so we encourage people to be part of small groups, life groups or community groups that may have a midweek meeting, but we would often say in our church that those groups are about more than just the meeting, the Bible study, if you like. They're actually about being able to connect with others, and those groups will have leaders that may or may not be one of the church leaders, one of the elders. And that means that we encourage people, if there are particular issues, if there are particular challenges, to go and speak first to their group leader. And that means that if you are walking alongside somebody and you are picking up they need more help, they need more intervention, if you like, you need help yourself, then that's a good starting place to encourage them to say, I'll go with you, let's talk to our group leader. And what we would then be saying is that at that level there are people that we encourage and equip and train to have a greater level of knowledge. We recognise an increase in gifting that's coming through experience as well, to be able to dive a bit deeper in and to help people work things through. But we also recognise that sometimes there is such a deep crisis that there is something that is significantly challenging. And that might be because of sin in the believer's life themselves, things that they have got involved in, habits they've got involved in, exposure to spiritual forces. But it could also be about what has happened to them, where there's been harm, where there's been abuse, where there's been spiritual abuse and spiritual harm done. And in those cases, we recognise there's a greater level of specialised care needed. There'll be greater specialism, greater attention needed, more experience, more training needed for those that are intervening spiritually. And so that's where we're encouraging people to say this needs to be brought to the attention of the elders and church leaders, so that somebody from there can work with them. And the other thing that we are also looking at as well is where actually the expertise may not be within the church. And indeed, it may not be spiritual expertise only that's needed, so that there may be need for professional counselling, there may be need for medical intervention, and of course in some of those cases there may be the need around sort of safeguarding and things for that to be reported, for other bodies including the police to be involved as well, or courts and lawyers and that kind of thing. And we would be as elders looking to make sure that that kind of help is available. So that gives you an idea of how we structure things, and that's the kind of sort of ethos that a lot of churches would run with. Have the confidence to know that you are permitted to bear one another's burdens, to pray for one another, even to challenge one another. Be alert to where your own limits are, and be ready to call for help. And often in churches that means that there might be a specific team, a specific ministry team. Are people delegated by the church to handle particular issues? Or it could be, as with our church, that actually the next point of call is into small group leaders. So know how your church functions, know how it structures, know how you can get help. And it might be that we will come back and maybe give some sort of overt pointers to say at some point in this series, to have a look and say, this is probably somewhere where you're going to run with it yourself. This might be an example of a situation where you might be going and saying, we need some further help here. Thanks for listening in.